Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. And today on the podcast, I would like to share with you some ideas related to a topic that I know well. And I bet you probably do too. That topic is specifically failure. I want to share with you why, while I appreciate many things about the current way that we approach failure in the modern American society, I don't actually think we go far enough. And why I, in my own life and with my children and with my family, why I want to go farther. First, let me address what I think is really good about the way that we handle failure. In our culture, we have some very useful and helpful and productive ideas related to failure. For example, you hear me talk about the idea that failure is an event. It's not a person. That resonates with you when I say it because that's part of our culture. We have a culture that does not, but we don't have a shame and honor culture. We don't have this idea that somehow somebody fails and now that person for his generations to come is now tainted with the mark of failure. No, we have a culture that is quick to forgive, quick to forget. We have a whole bunch of really productive ideas related to that culture, specifically where we talk about the importance of people actually being ready for failure and embracing it and quickly moving on with their life, right? If at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again. You can dust it off and try again, right? This is very much part of our culture. And in the American culture, we're very comfortable with the fact that many of the leaders that we admire have failed multiple times, right? President Trump, the president of the United States, has had multiple bankruptcies of his company. His whole rise to the top started with his story in his book, The Art of the Deal, where he recounts the idea of being $1 billion in debt. And we look at that person and say, look, this is what it means to be an American, right? We laud President Lincoln of failing and failing and failing. He failed at so many things. He failed at various elections until finally he was able to come back and win. We appreciate people in the world of business, right? Steve Jobs, the cultural hero that was famously ejected from his own company, and we embrace that. And I think it's a really good thing. And a lot of these things, by the way, actually apply to the world of modern financial planning. So, for example, I think that the modern American approach to bankruptcy courts is actually a really good and healthy part of our society, that we allow you to try something, do something, to fail spectacularly at it, and then to start over again and try again. And I'm really happy about that. I spent a lot of time over the years thinking about that. And over the years, I've just come to the idea that no, this is actually really good. We as a culture have decided that we appreciate innovation and people trying and people continuing to press forward more than we want to hold it over someone's head and do like some countries where they imprison you if you don't pay a debt. And we want to allow a pathway so that people can start over again. And I think this is fundamental actually to the American culture, that we as an American culture, we fundamentally praise the idea of regeneration. I think this actually makes us culturally strong, right? The best political book that I think really has the clearest outline for me in the current moment we're in is George Friedman's book called The Storm Before the Calm. And in that book, Friedman basically argues and articulates the thesis that one of the things that makes America great is that America is very good at reinventing itself. And he traces the various ways that we've reinvented our political system multiple times and reinvented our economic system multiple times. And I find those arguments persuasive. I consider them to be effective and useful. But still, even with all that cultural background, even with all that moral permission to fail, in my own life, I have discovered that a fear of failure has been an impediment to my own success. And because of that, I've spent some time thinking about it, and I want to share this lesson with you because perhaps it is the case for you also, that the fear of failure may be an impediment to your success. Now, in my life, for me personally, I've often been good at a lot of things that other people weren't good at. And I've done those things. I've pursued those different ideas. I've followed through on those things that for me I was good at. And a lot of things that I've not been good at, I've often not wanted to pursue. And you don't articulate this when you're doing that you're avoiding failure, but in reality, you really are. Because it's nice to do things that you're good at. It's nice to do things that you get acclaim for, that people say, hey, that's really great. And so naturally, as you start to grow up as a young person, you start to do things that you're good at and you recognize, hey, people are saying I'm really good at that. I'm getting positive attention for those. And then the things that you're not good at, you recognize I'm not getting positive attention for those, or I'm getting negative attention, and you often don't pursue that. And so even if you have this strong cultural foundation and background that I've just described, still, I think a lot of intelligent and effective people wind up considering those things and recognizing, you know what, I don't really want to do that stuff that makes me feel like a failure. It kind of stinks, and I don't really want to do it. And so we wind up going forward and doing the things that we're good at. Here is the fundamental problem, however. There is a continuum. And it's a continuum of success. I observe this a lot of times with virtually all virtues or virtually all personality characteristics, is that something that is innate to who you are can be a positive thing or it can be a negative thing depending on the actual circumstance. So for example, I'm highly agreeable. I'm not disagreeable. Psychologically, I'm a highly agreeable person. And that has a wonderful set of benefits. But then on the flip side, it comes with a significant set of potential downsides. And I have friends who are highly disagreeable people. And that comes with a whole set of downsides that are very obvious to me, but it comes with a whole set of potential benefits as well. And so when you position yourself as kind of a thinking person who doesn't fail very much, you can gain pleasure out of not actually failing and doing things that you're good at. But then the opposite end of the spectrum is that you can quickly move to a place of frustration with not actually accomplishing the things that you could. And I believe that in many ways, there's really kind of an ideal level of failure. And that ideal level is not no failure, nor is it constant failure, but rather there's a sweet spot in the middle, kind of the Goldilocks zone of failure, right? The middle zone where it's just right. And I want to avoid both extremes. I don't want to be failing all the time, because if I'm failing all the time, where does the positive reinforcement come from? If I go out and try to make a living as a horse jockey, I'm not going to make it. And if I just had all of my ideas based upon that particular profession, and I just failed constantly, there's a good chance that my life would end up dashed on the rocks without any success. We lionize the great men of history who have failed consistently and then ultimately overcome, but that lionization is always subject to a real problem of survivor's bias, that we only tell the stories of those who've survived. And if you go looking for them, you can find other men who could have been great men of history, but they just failed, and never succeeded, and therefore we don't remember them. And they're just missing from our consideration set. So we don't want to be failing all the time. We want to be working in areas where we're getting success. We want to get external feedback and validation for the projects that we're involved in so that we can be confident that, look, we are actually making progress here. But we don't want our failure rate to be zero. Why not? Because if you're not failing, you're never reaching your capacity. You're never finding your limits. And what's more is you're never pushing forward your limits. You're never advancing it. Now, I'm going to apply this to life, to business, to school, and to money in a moment. But before I do, think first about the realm that we know well, which is athletics. Think about athletics and think about coaching somebody. If you're coaching a young athlete, what's very, very important is that you're managing the failure rate. And you're managing these two things. If you just give a young athlete a task, an athletic task that is so simple and so easy that this person can just consistently always get it right, then this person is never growing. Let's use weightlifting as an example. I know more about weightlifting than a lot of other athletic ventures. If you're always just lifting a weight that's light, that you can easily control and easily do, you're not getting stronger because you're never approaching your limits. But on the other hand, there's no point whatsoever to actually going underneath the bar that is 3 times your max capacity and not even being able to move it. Neither of those is productive. What is productive, however, is to work with weights, primarily work with weights that are within your range of ability, and then systematically systematically fail at the edge of your ability, right? So you always want to fail some of your sets with weightlifting. If you are hurdling, you always want to miss some of your jumps, but not so many that you lose confidence. And we know that in athletic endeavors. It's intuitive. A good coach is always managing that, pushing the young athlete just enough so that he or she is at the range of failure for the optimal period, but never getting into a position where it's just always failure, not always constantly falling apart, because that becomes psychologically damaging. We know that in athletics, but where else in life do we actually apply that? For many of us, our fear of failure begins in school. Why? Well, because our grading system governs our long-term results. So if your skills are in, say, academics and not athletics, like mine are, then you look at academics and you say, all right, the ticket to good academics is perfection. So I need to get an A. I need to perform with excellence on all of my exams, on all of my tests. I need to get 100%. And if I can just get a consistent A+ across all my classes, then I'll have a very high grade point average. And this grade point average is likely to be the number that drives all of my long-term performance in life. And so therefore, I need to get this right. I need to get very high grades. And anything below an A+ or an A, depending on what system we're using, is unacceptable. And what happens is that students who are skilled in academics wind up then judging whether or not they should take a class based upon whether they're likely to get an A. And there are a lot of very hard striving academics who will drop a class if they think, oh, it's going to be too hard and it's going to bring down my GPA. But is that really what you want? Do you really want your intelligent student to not take a class that's going to be hard just because that person's going to get a B? The answer is no. There's no point in taking easy classes, just like there's no point in sliding up underneath a bar that is just a lightweight and is easy for you to lift. You need to be in difficult classes. And yet our entire grading structure is counterproductive in the way that we do that. Now, perhaps there's some solutions in academics that we could find. I personally tend to just say, let's just throw grades out the window primarily. But I think that certainly is not a universal solution, but it really is what I want to see with my homeschooled children. I want to see them beyond the level of their ability. I think an ideal error rate might be something like 20%. Let's say in math. I happen to own a math education company. I think a lot about this, and there's not that much benefit to getting 100% on all your math problems. But you certainly don't want to be missing half the math problems. You probably want to be getting 85, 90% of them right and missing 10 or 15% of them. And that's kind of how you know you're at that efficient frontier curve of learning where you're making progress and you're at the edge of your ability. And if you'll do that consistently over time, you'll make faster progress than if you're so scared of getting problems wrong that you never make progress. And what is interesting about, I've spent a lot of time digging into the literature around learning science. What's interesting about learning science is that the academics who study and teach us about learning science have demonstrated that actually getting questions wrong is in many ways a better learning tool than getting them right. Is that when you get a question wrong, you engage with the subject more deeply. I've told this story, but it's remarkable that I remember it. And I think it's my perfect example. That I remember when I was in first grade, and I remember getting a question wrong on a first grade test. And the question on the test for my little first grade in homeschool, when my grandmother was homeschooling me, was, how many digits are there? And I sat and labored over that question as a first grader. And I thought to myself, well, there's either 9 or there's 10. There's 9 or there's 10. And I wasn't sure whether there were 9 or there were 10, because I thought, do we count from 1 to 9 or do we count from 1 to 10? And so I thought it through carefully, and I chose 9. I put 9 on the paper because I thought, no, I don't think 10 is a digit. So I put 9 on the paper, and my grandmother marked it wrong. And I said, oh, man, Grandma, I was so close to getting this right. I knew that there were 10. I knew the digits were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then she instructed me, no, Joshua, not only are you wrong, very lovingly, of course, but not only are you wrong, but you're completely wrong about your other answer. The reason that there are 10 is because 0 is a digit, not because 10 is a digit. And so the 10 digits are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I was so frustrated and so upset about getting that question wrong as a first grader that here I am, many decades later, still mad at myself, but I have never since forgotten a digit or the number of digits. And this happens with language learning, right? That one of the best ways to learn a foreign language word is to get the wrong word or to not have it when you need it or to use it in the wrong context. And you go and there's some complex thing and you say it completely wrong and boom, it's drilled into your memory. You know how to do that. And so these failing events are actually really important from a learning perspective. And if you're not getting things wrong, you're not learning effectively. But my point is that academics, for most of us, really has shaped how we approach life. So now we get out of academics and we move into our career world. Well, we've been taught, acculturated, indoctrinated for 12, 16, 18, 20 years of academics to say that there is a right answer and I have to reproduce the right answer. And if not, I will get it wrong. And those of us who are good at academics often wind up taking that same basic idea into the workforce. We want to do our jobs right. We want to get everything correct. We want to be good at what we do because we're star performers. And all of a sudden you get out into real life and you discover real life doesn't work that way. It works dramatically differently. It just is not that way at all. And you discover that all of a sudden, sometimes, the people who were the best at academics don't wind up being very good at real life success. And those who didn't really care about academics wind up being better at real life success because real life success has much more to do with iteration than it does with the right answer, right? There's not one right answer. Imagine, for example, the pressure that, let's say that you are a young man and you want to find the woman that you are going to marry, and you're this kind of perfectionist person. So you sit down and you just you say, here's all the things that I need and here's all the things that I'm going to do right. And you don't talk to any girls, you don't iterate at all, you don't practice your skills. You just wait until you meet Miss Right, and all of a sudden one day, she's there right in front of you. And you decide, this is the time I'm going to go up and I'm going to speak to Miss Right. And I'm going to say, would you like to marry me? How's that going to go? Doesn't go very well, does it? Right? Zero chance of that working. Whereas if you've asked a few girls out and some have said yes and some have said no, and you've gone on a few dates and you like this person, you don't like that person, then all of a sudden when Miss Right shows up, you're better prepared to say, hey, would you like to marry me over the course of time? And all of a sudden, things work a little bit more smoothly. Or let's say that you are accustomed to getting everything right, and you go into your career and you say, well, I'm going to approach my career with all of just the perfect self-knowledge, and I'm going to take all these career assessments and all of these examples, and I'm going to know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And you dedicate all your life to preparing for this moment, and you get into your career. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, something is different than you thought. And now you're gobsmacked. What am I supposed to do? I don't know how to deal with this. Meanwhile, your buddy who's just bumbled from this job to that job to this, this other thing, he's no big deal. He's just going to quit the job he didn't like, go get another one. And he's got a sense of confidence that comes from having done this before. And so the same thing applies to most levels of money that actually matter. And so what tends to happen is the person like me who doesn't like to fail tends to go with the world of safety. You go and you work a safe job and you build a safe life and you live conservatively and you avoid debt and you never take a risk. And you read that Warren Buffett says the rule of money, the first rule of investing is don't ever lose money. And you resolve never to lose money. And so from the ripe old age of 18, you start investing conservatively because after all, we should never lose money. And if your account value goes down by 50%, it requires a 200% return to go up. And so you wind up on the safe path. And you do that, and you do that, and you might get to a point, something like me, where you kind of wake up one day and you're like, come on, this seems ridiculous. Is that really what I should have been doing? Is that really the right pathway? Why did I do that? Why did I not just go out and try things? And you discover it has to do with the fear of failure. Do you derive your self-image and your self-worth by not failing? Well, if you do, you're not going to go far in life. It's not going to work. So I think that if this is true, and I believe it is, I think that first of all, we should get rid of that software that says that failure is in any way a bad thing and install a new set of software that says that not only is failure inevitable and we should get ourselves up when we get bucked off the horse and try it over, but rather that failure is desirable, and that if you are not failing, then you are failing because you're failing to find your limits. And that in general, with anything that you do, you should be pushing yourself to the point where you are failing. And it is better to have 80 or 90, I want to say 90% because 80% feels 20% failure feels like too much. But of course, given the fact that the world just basically runs on a Pareto principle, it probably is 80-20. But I'm just going to go with 90-10 because I can't quite stomach the idea of 20% failures. But basically, if you should look at the world and say, if I'm not having a 10% failure rate, I'm probably not doing the right game. And I'm probably playing below my ability. I'm probably not where I should be if I'm not failing 10% of the time. And if we can change the psychology around it, and we could recognize that this is true, and then we could be those kinds of men who actually seek out the failure and take joy in it. One of the comics, who was the guy? His name is blanking me. There's the comic that, the dry deadpan guy that loved, he died, Hal, I'm sorry, I can't come up with it. But he was the guy, he was on SNL for a long time. Lots of people say, and he died a few years ago. Oh, he's my favorite comic. And one of the things that he would do is somehow, for some reason, he just loved telling these jokes that just absolutely bombed. I never understood it myself, but I watched around the time of his death. He died of cancer, didn't tell anybody. And around the time of his death, I started watching a bunch of videos of his just because I never really was into the humor before. And I would enjoy his stand-up comic, but then he would just do these routines on big stages where he was bad and he would bomb and he would tell dumb jokes. And everyone would go on and on about what a great comic he was because he could do this. And I didn't get it. Over time, I learned to get it more. But in that context, what I realized is he had reached a level of his life in which he was so confident in his craft that even if he wasn't doing it well, he could just flat out enjoy the fact that there was this kind of insider joke of him not doing it well, and he could redefine the rules. And you reach a level in some things that you do where you just recognize, I can just do this poorly and enjoy it and make fun of it when it happens. And so every juggler has a routine for when he drops the balls and how to make that part of the joy. And in fact, when you're watching a juggling routine or when you're watching a magic routine, you're really rooting for the guy to drop the balls because you want to see him do it. And when he gets it right, you enjoy that. But when he gets it wrong, you really enjoy that. And a lot of things are that way. And so if you embrace like some industries have to, right? If you're juggling, you have to learn how to embrace it when you drop the balls. If you're telling jokes, you have to learn to embrace it when you bomb. When you get into those professions and then you go on to other things in life, you can really do well because you understand that the failure is an inevitable part of it, and that's where you're at the frontier. So let's apply this to money. Where do I see the application for this? Well, number one is, of course, the career stuff and the academic stuff. But that stuff is relatively straightforward. To put it succinctly, if you don't like the career that you're in, you don't like the job that you're in, just go try something else. It's not that serious. It's not really that big of a deal. Just go try something else. Where the impact really is significant, however, is when we are working with employees who are trying to make the transition over to business ownership. What I've observed working in that space for a time is that you have to resolve to accept the failure, or you're never going to go. The people who go through their process and just basically decide that I'm going to get it all right from the beginning seem to not often do well. And if you just embrace the fact that we're not going to seek out failure, I'm not going to make a dumb decision, but I'm going to try to make the best decision I know, and I'm resolved to accept failure when it occurs, then you can get to the iteration, which is where you learn, and you can make progress quickly. And while it's not universal, the theme that I have observed in many very successful businessmen is that they had one or a series of slow starts, no starts, outright failures at the beginning, but that they learned so much and they learned so quickly that they were able to go on and do more and do faster and better. And that's astonishing when you actually think about it. Because real life is not like grades. Real life is not where you either pass or you fail, and then that sticks with you for the rest of your life and harms your record. Real life, basically, you wake up every day and you start new, and all of the past is wiped away. And I think of one client I've worked with for many years. And this client started with a business that he thought was a great move, and then that business just totally bombed. But across the street, there was a different business, and he moved over and got involved in that business, and that business succeeded. And I've seen that in my own business life. I've seen that in so many others, that you've got to simply say, the failure is good. And every time I've gone wrong with Radical Personal Finance, it's always been because of my fear of failure, especially fear of failure related to my ego. And everything that's gone right has always come when I've just simply done something, even though there was a good chance of failing, and embraced the failures that come along the way because I learned so much from those failures. That's how life is. So when I talk with last week at family camp, I was talking with somebody who was considering starting a business. He said, well, I just don't know how to get it right. And I just said, you're never going to get it right. Okay. What you have to do is you have to install, you can do well, but there is no right? We're not dealing with the world of right and wrong here. We're dealing with the world of more effective and less effective. And guess what? Even if you do your great studied research, chances are pretty good that something's going to come out and whack you upside the head. Right? Imagine if you were an entrepreneur a century ago and you had saved your money and you were looking around and you were saying, what is the best and safest thing that I can do? And you look around and you say, look, there's horse and buggies and every buggy has a whip. And so what I should do, the thing that has not changed in a millennium, is I should go into the buggy whip business and I'm going to become a buggy whip manufacturer. And so you get started. Did you make a good decision? Absolutely, you made a good decision. You chose an industry that has a moat. You chose an industry that hasn't changed in a millennium or a couple of millennia. Like you chose something that was solid, that was stable. You chose a product that was going to be consumed, that wears out, and that people need to replace. You went into the buggy whip manufacturing business. And that was a good decision until it wasn't. So if you derive your sense of self-worth from the fact that I make good decisions, you made a good decision, but then something changed. And you've got to be the person to say, oh man, everything changed. I did the best I could. I made the best decision I knew how to make, but now everything's changed. So let me just quickly pick up and move on to the next thing. That's life. That's how life works, is that the man who could just quickly acknowledge, hey, that was a defeat and move on to the next thing and iterate and change and iterate and adapt is very well positioned for success. The man who sits back and just spends all his time thinking really is not. And that was where, in speaking with this man, I said to him, you've got to just understand that risk is not real in this context. There are risks that are real, right? Risks of death, be careful with those. Risks of dismemberment, serious things like that do still occur in the world. But in the world of business, risk is kind of fake, right? It's all fake. Risk is fake. Money is fake. Success is fake. There is no external standard that is somehow, if I just achieve this thing, you're going to be wildly successful. And by the time you reach there, you're going to see sitting back and just saying, man, I'm just such a failure. I promise you that's what will occur. Because that's how we are as humans. Think right now. I'll give you my argument for it. Think right now about how much money you're currently making. Think right now about how much money you currently have. Now go back 20 years and ask the 20-year younger you, hey, you, can you imagine that if in 20 years you were earning, $230,000 a year, and if you had a net worth of $700,000, could you imagine how you would feel? And I bet you the you 20 years ago would say, man, I'd be rich. But I tell you, there ain't a person in this audience who is earning 200 and whatever I said, or has a net worth of $700,000 who feels rich. Doesn't happen. Every time you achieve something, you just look back and say, but this guy over here makes more. And okay, I'm making 200 and whatever, but man, I need to be making 450 because that's what my lifestyle really demands. Or you think, man, at 700, where I'm really going to be happy is when I get to 3 mil. And you get to 3 million, you look around and think, this just ain't enough. I got to get to 5. I got to get to 10. Guess what? That never stops. That never stops. So it's all fake. It's all a mental game. It's not real. Just like happiness, right? There is no magical state called happiness. You never reach this certain point where you say, I am now happy. It's basically a decision. Happiness is a decision. You decide, I will be happy. No matter what, I will be happy. Success is a decision. You say, I am successful. And you'd make whatever your bar of success is as simple and straightforward, and whatever you believe success is, that's how you know you're doing it. It's not a matter of anything else. You decide those things. It's all fake. And so risk is fake. Right? The whole idea of risk, it's fake. Now it's real, but it's fake. It's real in the sense that risk is a useful word that we can use. And so when we're analyzing an investment portfolio, we can say, well, what is the normal average volatility of this particular portfolio based on the asset classes they're in? And if we're analyzing the risk of a business, we can say, well, what are the various risks that can face this business? And if we have counterparty risk, and we have financing risk, and we have governmental risks, and those are useful categories to study. But I'm not talking to you on that level. What I'm saying is, basically, you either got to say, am I going to be in the game or am I going to be out of the game? And what's interesting is that I've experienced that once you get in the game's kind of fun. So I'll tell you my fear, right? My fear is stand-up comedy. I have a couple friends who I talk with about doing stand-up comedy, and they're doing that. And what's funny is that I'm genuinely afraid of doing stand-up comedy. Humor is not my skill set. I don't know anything about it. I don't understand anything about it. I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to wield it. I never tell jokes. I don't get it. And after spending years overcoming I'll tell you a funny story. So we did Radical Family Camp. And this year at Radical Family Camp, I scheduled several talks for myself. I scheduled two main talks, and then I did some sideline talks that I expected that weren't for the full group, but that people wound up coming to. So I did several talks, and that's different because so last year I basically did no talks because last year I had a bunch of other speakers, and so I didn't do any talks, and that worked out because I was actually crazy sick last year. The first year I had done a bunch of talks, but I didn't know what content to do. So anyway, this year I did some talks. But then we also at Family Camp, we do this thing called Skit Night. And it's a talent show and a skit that I've become a fan of that I didn't know before. So all year I've been thinking about what am I going to do at this talent show or this skit night? And I don't want to I don't want to take away, like, the goal is not for me to perform. The goal is for the children to perform. But I think it really sets a good example when adults participate and adults sing a song or they do something fun. I think that sets a good example for the children. And it's primarily about the children, but I think adults should participate. So last year I didn't do anything. It was the first year we did the talent show. It was a big hit last year. And so all year I've been thinking about, what am I going to do? So I prepared this year a funny poem that I read. And I didn't write the poem, but I had selected it among my things. I said, this is a crowd pleaser for the kids, but it's a funny poem. And I had planned I wanted to have it memorized. It's a long poem. I was going to memorize it. I was going to practice it. I really wanted to do it well. And life turned out like it was, and I was woefully unprepared. And I was like, well, I can either read it or I can not. So I decided I would go ahead and just read it, and I would perform it, try to make it fun for the children. And I would try to perform it. I get up in front of the crowd. So remember, I've been speaking at multiple talks, and I don't have any nervousness at all at this point in time about talking at family camp, or really about speaking about anything related to what I do. I enjoy it. So the nervousness, the butterflies, all that is gone. And I'd given multiple talks to the entire camp, and I had no nervousness. I enjoyed it. I was prepared. Everything was ready to go. But then I get to the talent show. And I get up in front of the skits, the talent show. And I get up in front of the audience, which is a fun after dinner audience. We're doing wacky stuff. And I go to read my poem, and I can't keep my hand from shaking. I'm holding my phone, and my whole hand is like shaking from nerves, from fear. And I'm like, I have got to suppress this. And so I'm actively trying to still my hand. I'm doing all the tricks, but I'm sitting there while I'm performing the poem, watching my hand shake while I just read a poem to a group of children. And I know the poem's going to be a winner. I know it's going to be funny. And I just thought, isn't that like the perfect example of how you do something that you're scared of, which is humor? You get involved in something that's humor, and all of a sudden, I've got these crazy nerves of my hand trembling like it's my first time ever when it comes to reading a poem. So the point is, like, that's how scared I am of things like humor and stand-up comedy. So someday, I'm not ready for it yet. Maybe a decade from now, I'll be confident enough to do it. But someday, I'm going to go and do like a stand-up comedy night or something like that. And so I'm really interested. Anytime I have friends who do this, I ask them about it. And the point is that once you accept that you're going to bomb, and once you do bomb, I don't know if it's no big deal, but it's not that big a deal. And so I haven't yet accepted that I'm going to bomb when it comes to doing some open mic night at a comedy club, and I haven't yet done it. And so therefore, I'm still scared of it. But once I go and find an open mic night and bomb and nobody laughs, then I won't be scared of it anymore, because the worst case scenario has happened, and I will, on the other side of it, be breathing. And I'm sure I'll be humbled, but probably whenever I get around to doing that, there'll probably be 2 laughs. And then I can do I can just focus on the fact that I succeeded at 2 laughs. And so imagine that somebody goes to do a comedy show and they do a 5-minute routine and they get 2 laughs. But imagine that person just focuses on the 2 laughs. And then you come back, and on the other side of it, they go back and they practice, and they come back next time and they get 3 laughs. And the next time they get 4 laughs. And imagine if that person derives all of his satisfaction from the fact that the number of laughs per routine is going up. And every time I do this, I bomb for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. But the 23 seconds in which I get those 4 laughs, that's golden. And imagine that guy keeps showing up and keeps showing up and keeps showing up and keeps showing up and keeps showing up. And he's not stupid about it. He actually tries. He studies the craft. He looks at other people. He learns their jokes, and he keeps showing up and he keeps showing up and keeps showing up. That guy is absolutely indomitable, right? You will never beat him. And if he enjoys the process, if he enjoys what he's doing, and he just says, I have so much fun doing this thing, you will never beat him, because he's in it for the game. He's in it for the love of the game. And his success metrics are totally different than yours. If you expect to come out to a comedy night and on your first performance ever in front of a crowd, not have your hands shake, or if you expect to come out in front of a comedy night and have a 5-minute routine that's as great as whoever the great comedians are, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And if you expect to somehow magically come out with this great business plan and it's all going to work well on your first run through, and somehow other people fail, but you're not going to fail because you're just smart enough and you can just be prepared enough to, never fail, you're setting yourself up for a delusion. But if you recognize the risk is fake, just like I'm doing with the little comedy thing, right? The risk is fake. I'm telling you I'm scared of it. And so what happens is, instead of being scared of it, all my friends will come out and they'll be proud of me for doing it because I just acknowledged, like, this is this thing I'm really scared of. And I'm not doing that. It's not a priority for me at the moment. But someday it will be. Someday I'll turn my attention to that and I'll learn how to use humor and I'll learn how to tell a joke, and I'm excited about that someday. But my point is the mindset. So the same thing has to apply with regard to business. And if you're sitting there thinking that you can somehow wish the risk away, ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. But what you can do is you can just believe the risk away, because you can redefine risk. You can redefine it, and you can say, I am more scared of not doing the thing that I want to do and not being able to respect myself, or I'm more scared of not trying than I am of trying and failing. And the man who just refuses to quit, he can't be beat. He can never fail. If you just refuse to quit, you can never fail, because you just are learning and you're learning and you're learning and you're learning. Same thing applies, by the way, with investing. You can say, I want to learn to be an investor, but there is no investor who gets it all right every time. So you're going to lose money. There's just no way around it. You're going to lose money. So you can get involved and you can learn. You can get involved and you can learn, and you can do a deal and you can learn. You can do a deal and you can learn. Now that I've made those points, hopefully persuasively, let me just talk for a moment about risk and how to mitigate it. First of all, you can genuinely mitigate risk with psychological techniques. You can genuinely reframe risk. You can genuinely work really hard to just reframe the concept of risk so that it largely goes away. But that won't do all of it. There's still going to be elements of risk that are real, that you're really going to have to face. And so when you face those elements of risk, you can plan for them. You can prepare for them. So let me use the comedy example. We can recognize the fact that at the end of this comedy set, or whatever it is, I'm going to be proud of myself for doing it, and I'm not gonna care. You can also apply tools and techniques. I've always loved the title of Charlie Daniels' biographies. Just never look at the empty seats, right? Never look at the empty seats. You can have something that you're doing that is a failure or a success based upon who you look at. Never look at the empty seats. Look at the people who are actually there, encouraging you, that are appreciating it, listening to you, engaging with it. Look at the customers who are in your business, whatever it is, and you can deal with that. You can also work really hard to position yourself for success. So the truth is, you don't have to bomb when you do your comedy routine, right? You can write some really funny jokes, and you can practice them on your friends over time, just slipping in those jokes. And you don't have to bomb the first time. You should be prepared to, but you don't have to. You can work at it. You can study the craft. I'm sure there's books written about comedy. I'm sure that there's a master class that somebody could take. I'm sure that some stand-up comedians have taken and deciphered the whole way to be a skillful stand-up comedian. You can go to open mic nights every single week for years, and you can listen to all the other comics, and you can figure out what they do or what they don't do. You can not bomb. You can be good at it. And that's where we get to things like business and investing. You can study the market. You can plan for it. You can predict about it. And you can look at your investments, and you can educate yourself so that when you make an action, you're making an educated guess, and you're fully prepared to accept defeat, but you also are positioned to to succeed. Because there are people who win the first time through. There are people whose businesses are successful. There are ways to measure these things, to measure your temperament, to see if what you're doing is right. In addition to that, you can also know what to do and how to bail if you do fail. And so the comedy night example is you can understand and study what to do when a joke doesn't work. You can understand and study. You can understand and study what to do when you fail. Right? You can practice the routine. If you are a juggler and you drop the balls, you can practice what you'll do when you drop the balls, and so you can just practice not dropping the balls. And when you practice that routine enough and you drop the balls, no problem. You can practice the joke that you'll make after a joke goes flat, and you can try that out. And you can know what your worst case scenario is. In the comedy example, you can just say, guys, I'm too nervous. I thought I could do this. And you walk off stage, hand the microphone to the MC, and everyone will give you a clap for trying, and you'll move on. So in business, there's kind of the same way, except that we can add more techniques. We could say, let's assume that this business fails, but what should we keep in reserve? We're going to not mortgage our house. We're going to not mortgage our cars. We're going to make sure that even when this business fails, we still have a car to drive. We still have a house to come home to. You can choose to set aside assets, right? You can do asset protection planning. You can make sure that you have control over what you'll lose. When you're learning to invest, you can make resolutions. For example, I'm never going to put more than 10% of my investment capital in any one position. So that way I always have this reserve, or my maximum account size is going to be this amount, and I'm never going to trade my retirement money. And so you can put rules in place, and those rules really will work. They really do work. They're effective at helping you to consistently win when you engage in them and when you follow those rules. So you don't have to just accept it as a binary, either I win or I lose scenario. And you don't have to accept failure as either I succeed or I fail. You can adjust the meanings of these words. We're not dealing with stuff that is right or wrong. We're not dealing with moral absolutes. We're dealing with a world of psychology, and we're dealing with a world of change. And so if you embrace that and you recognize that, then you can engage with all of these things in a really powerful way. And I hope that my perspective will be helpful to you, because at this point, I'm getting to be kind of an elder in this space of financial advice and whatnot. Kind of weird for me to think about it, but I'm not a rookie anymore. And it's fascinating now for me to look and to see these patterns repeated again and again. And if I find that somebody isn't in a satisfying career but is not trying things, I get really nervous. And I say, listen, you got to go try things. You got to go get experience. This is not working for you. But that comes after, iterating a lot of times myself. And if you will embrace the attitude of that failure is not only inevitable, but it is actually desirable, because by pursuing failure, you get to the limits of your capacity. I think that's a winning mindset that will take you much farther than the opposite. I've spent good portions of my life playing conservatively. And what I found is that even when I won, there wasn't a lot of joy there. And let me use one analogy. How good do you feel when you suit up and play a game against somebody who is obviously your inferior, right? How good do you feel when you crush your 5-year-old at chess, or when you play tic-tac-toe, right? How good do you feel when you win a game of tic-tac-toe? I can play a game of tic-tac-toe against any child in the world, and I will never lose that game. We will either tie or draw, or I will win. There is no world in which I will play tic-tac-toe with a child and lose. And I get no joy whatsoever out of playing tic-tac-toe because there's no element of risk. I can play chess against some young people and know that I'm going to win. But one of the greatest joys I had was last year when my son beat me at chess for the first time. That was really fun because now I have a worthy opponent. And now if I have to pay attention. Now if I win a game, I feel happy about it, unlike, the previous years. Same thing occurs in any sport where the fun is to be out on the edge of your ability, fighting a worthy opponent. You don't want to be crushed, but you want to fight a worthy opponent, someone who's at your level. And then when you win against that person who's at your level, you feel really good. Well, it's the same in business. It's the same in your career. It's the same in finances. It's the same in wealth. It's all a game. It's all a game. It's an important game. It's a meaningful game, but it's all a game. And if you can embrace it as a game, something that you engage in for the love of the game, for the fun, you are unbeatable. You can absolutely become unbeatable. That's what I've learned. Hasn't come easy. Been a lot of sleepless nights. But over time, slowly, I've come to realize that I genuinely can change the game. And that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So I hope to save you some time by just trying to share some of the lessons I've learned in hopes that you can learn them faster. Try them out for yourself. Take time. But the past isn't real. Right? It's gone. It doesn't exist. It really doesn't. Yesterday really did end last night. Today really is a brand new day. Failure really is an event. It's not a person. Today, you can just start over again. And if you fail today, tomorrow you can just start over again. And if you fail tomorrow, the next day you can just start over again. You can just do things. And I think you should. Thanks for listening. Be back with you soon.